What's up? Professor Wergeles here. We're taking a look at lecture number 30. Lecture number 30 is about threaded unzipper. This is the perfect example for a final project. We're using an external library, which is a good way to earn bonus points. And for your final project, you want to solve a real world problem. Now, just to give a little introduction about this application, when you guys submit your zip files, we basically have 100 people in the class, 120, and everybody uploads a zip file from NetBeans. Well, normally what a TA would do when they're grading or while I'm grading is I would have to unzip that file, load it into NetBeans, and then run that file. And it's just a burdensome task. It takes forever. I got to unzip a file, load it into NetBeans, and if I could just speed that up so I could just run it, play it, grade it, go, that would be awesome. And that's what's done here. So I have my file system, like on Mac or Windows, I have a way to unzip files. It's just not very efficient. I want to unzip the entire directory and I want it to be fast, and I want it to unzip simultaneously. So I want it to be a concurrent program. And this application does that. So I built my own Java app that basically I can put all the zip files from a semester, unzip them all at once, load them into NetBeans, grade, and away I go. So I solved a problem that I was facing every day. That's the best thing to do for your final project. Pick something that you would use every day or that somebody else would use every day and go and build that. That's the best way to build an app. That's the best way to start a company. Okay, so that's what I've built here. That's what ThreadedUnzipper is. Now, first things first, is download the zip file and load it into NetBeans. So I created a new directory for this lecture. We're on lecture 30. Okay, lecture 30 is ThreadedUnzipper. Load this into NetBeans, and we can take a look at the example. Now, the first thing is, again, just like the previous lecture, if I want to close this application while the threads are running, I need to do so by setting an event listener on the stage. So we need to open up the main class. If I go to threadedunzipper.java, you'll see I've done this already. Okay, we've implemented it before, so we're just going to do a review. Before, we used a static method to call the load. So it'd say fxml loader.load, and we'd pass this in to the load method directly. Instead, we're creating an instance of loader. That way, later we can have access to the controller. The controller here is in the fxml file. So if I right click and edit, so we're all the way to the right, you'll see fx controller, and that's how I link the view to the controller in our MVC architecture. This is how I link them. This is on the root. So you see VBox is the first element on the fxml file, or in the fxml file. That's going to be our root element. So our VBox is the root. So I come back over here to the main. When I say get controller, okay, I'm going to get controller. And when I say parent load, it's going to load that VBox, which is the root, and place it on the scene. So everything else is the same. The only difference here is I'm passing the stage, which is a parameter. Okay, you'll see here it's in the method. So it's a method parameter. It's a temporary variable that's passed to this method. When I click the play button, the stage is created and passed to the start method. Once the start method is finished executing, this is a parameter, so the stage will be destroyed. There's other ways to get the stage. They're just not very convenient. So before this stage is deleted, I pass it over here to the controller. In the controller's ready method, you'll see I basically store it to a class field or a global variable. And now I have access to the stage throughout the program. So it's just really nice if I want to switch scenes or I want to have an event listener on the stage. This is just a really nice way to do it. Before this stage is destroyed, pass it over to the controller so I have access to it later. Now, I'm going to be using a library here. And you can actually see it if I open up libraries. Right now, I only have the JDK. But if I go back to the downloaded file, and if I open it up, you'll see here right in the root directory for the project, I have a jar file. It's called zip4j. This is actually a library. Back in JDK 8, we did not have functionality to unzip files. And if there was functionality, maybe later in JDK, I remember in the earlier JDK 8s, or you couldn't unzip zip files. And even before JDK, there just wasn't a good way. And if they included it. It just wasn't very convenient. So Zip4J came out. It was actually by a third party. So if I search Zip4J, you actually see it's by this guy named Lingala. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but this is the author. He's updated his website several times. This is an old jar file. It's been tried and true. It's been out for a long time, since JDK8. You can actually see the author. He has a picture here. His name is Lingala. He's a third party. He developed this library so you can basically unzip zip files. Now, this was not easy to do back in JDK8 and some of the earlier JDKs. Now, JDK 11, 14, whatever we're on, 15, it's easy to do. It's already built in. Oracle and the JDK, they've already included that in. So now you may want to use just a built-in library, but back then we didn't have that functionality. So what I went onto the web and I searched, JDK 8 unzip a zip file, because I couldn't do it. Okay, I couldn't do it. This is a good article. This MK Young, he's really good. You'll see here, he tries some different things. Zip input stream. This is probably newer. This is probably not JDK 8. And basically what came up was Zip4J. Okay, you may not see it as frequently now, but back then that was the main article. Zip4J, it was all over the place. Everybody was using it, and this third party guy created it. Now he has it here. You can see he has a GitHub repo. You'll see it was updated 19 days ago, so it's still being worked on. So if you find some library for your final project, just make sure it's being updated. If it's 6 years old, it still may work, but it may be old. It may have bugs. So you'll see there's a lot of contributors now for this project, and people are still updating it. So people are still using it. I like it because it's so easy to use. They really thought about usability. I call a few lines of code, I can unzip a zip file, and that wasn't possible, or it wasn't as easy back when JDK was out. So for your final project, look for these things. Look for a tool. You want to do something. Don't build it from scratch. Think, if I build this from scratch, how to unzip a zip file. That'd take me forever. I don't want you to build stuff from scratch for your final project. Go online, see if somebody builds something, see if there's a jar file you can use, which is an external library from a third party, and use it. Make sure it's from a reliable source. You'll see here, this is 19 days ago. I got 20 contributors, and you can see how many downloads. This thing is very popular. So it's a good one. If nobody's downloaded it, it looks like from a sketchy website, it looks like it could be a virus. Don't install it. Make sure it's from a good source, and then use it. And this is a way to get bonus points. So the first thing is, I want to use Zip4J. How do I add it? Or let's say you're on your final project. You want to use another library. The first step is put the jar file directly in your final project directory, or whatever project you're working on. You'll see that jar file that I downloaded. I put it right here in the root directory. What's cool about that is now when I go to libraries, I can right click. I can say add a jar file, and you'll search for it. Okay, you're actually going to use a relative path. It's right in the same directory. So let's go to where you downloaded ThreadedUnzipper. Wherever you downloaded, go to that now. So for me, I have a spring 2021 lecture. I have 3330. And then I'm going to go into my lectures directory. I'm going to go to lecture 30. I'm going to open up ThreadedUnzipper, and here's the jar file. Now, if you click on the jar file and it says relative path and there's nothing in front of it, you're good to go for the final project. If you use an absolute path, it's not going to be the same on the TA's machine. Okay, so you can have issues here. You don't want to do this. You want to use a relative path and make sure it's in the root directory so there's nothing in front here. If I put it in source and make it deep into the file system, you still may have problems, and the TA may not be able to find it as easily later if for some reason your path isn't working. The problem is, if your path's not working, you will get points deducted. So make sure you put it right there in your root directory, and make sure it looks just like this. It has nothing in front of it. It just says whatever the file name .jar. So I choose this. Now I've successfully imported an external library, which is bonus for the final project. I want you to use external libraries. Don't build stuff from scratch. That's very important. Now we're going to use this library here in a second, but first, let's talk about a functional interface.